So this is about the Chola government, local self-government. The king was the major important person in the Chola administration. All authority rested in his hand, but he had a council of ministers to advise him. The kings often went on tours in order to oversee the administration. The Cholas maintained a large army consisting of elephant, cavalry, and infantry, which were called the three limbs of the army. The infantry was generally armed with spear. Most of the kings had bodyguards who were sworn to defeat the kings even at the cost of their lives. The Ventian traveler Marco Polo, who visited Kerala in the 13th century, says that all the soldiers who were bodyguards burnt themselves in the fernal fire of the monarch when he died, a statement which may well be exaggeration. The Chola also had a strong navy, as we have seen, which dominated the Malabar and Coromandel coast and for some time the entire Bay of Bengal. The Chola the Chola state, including areas of central control and loosely administration area under different type of local government. The state was interspersed with hill people and tribe. The basic unit of administration was Nadu, which consists of number of mm, villages having close kinship ties and also close association. The number of nadus increased as fresh lands were brought under cultivation by means of irrigation works such as ponds, wells, etc., and by converting hill or tribal people into agriculturists. Grant to Brahmins and temple increased, both of which helped in expanding cultivation. In the Chola kingdom, Nadus were grouped into Valannadu. The Chola state was divided into four mandalams or provinces. Sometimes prince of royal family were appointed governors of provinces. Officials were generally paid by giving them assignments of revenue bearing lands. The Chola rulers built a network of royal roads which were useful for trade as well as movement of the army. Trade and commerce flourished in the Chola Empire, and there were some gigantic trade guilds which traded with Java and Sumatra. The Chola also paid attention to irrigation. The river Kaveri and other rivers were used for purpose. Many tanks for irrigation were built. Some of the Chola rulers carried out an elaborate survey of land in order to fix the government share of the land revenue. Modern accessories calculate the tax to be 1/3 of the produce. In addition to land tax, the Chola rulers drew their income from tolls on trade, taxes on provision, okay, taxes on profession, and also from the plunder of the neighboring territory. The Chola rulers were wealthy and could afford building a number of towns and magnificent monuments, including temples. We have already referred to local self-government in the village in some area in the Rashtrakuta Empire. We know about village government in the Chola Empire from a number of inscriptions. We hear of two assemblies called Uru and the Sabha or Mahasabha. The Uru was the general assembly of the village. However, we know more about the working of the Mahasabha. This was a gathering of the adult men in the Brahmin village, which were called Agraharam. There were villages with Brahmin settlements in which most of the land was rent free. These villages enjoyed a land measure of autonomy. The affairs of the village were managed by an exclusive committee to which educated people owning property were elected either by drawing lots or by rotation. Drawing lots. Okay. These members had to retire every 3 years. There were other committees for helping in assessment and collecting the land revenue. For maintenance of law and order and justice, one of the important committee was the Tank Committee, which looked after the distribution of water to the fields. The Mahasabha could distribute new lands and exercise ownership rights over them. It could also raise loans for the village and levy tax. The self government enjoyed by this Chola village was very fine system. To some extent, this system worked in the other village as well. However, the growth of feudalism, which is discussed in an early chapter, restricted their autonomy. Cultural life, the Chola rulers saw the further growth and climax of the Bhakti movement, which we have discussed separately. The movement was closely linked to temple. The extent and resource of the Chola Empire enabled the ruler to build great temples such as Tanjavur, Gangai Konda Cholapuram, Kanji, etc. Excuse me. The ruler maintained large household and large palaces with banquet halls, spacious garden and terrace. Thus we learn 7 or 5 story houses for their chief. Unfortunately, none of the places of this period have survived. The Chola capital Gangaikonda Cholapuram is now just a small village near Tanjavur. However, description of the magnificent places of the ruler and their ministry and of equal magnificent houses in which the wealthy merchant lived are to be found in the literature of the period. Temperature architecture in the south attained its climax under Chola. The style of architecture which came into vogue during this period is called Dravida because it was confined largely to South India. The main feature of this style was the building of many story above Garbhagriha, the innermost chamber where the chief deity resides. The number of stories varied from 5 to 7 and they had a typical style which can be called as Vimana. A pillared hat called Mantapa with elaborate carved pillars and a flat roof which was generally placed in front of the sanctum. It acted as an audience hall and was a place for various other activities such as ceremonial dance which were performed by the Devadasi, the women dedicated to the service of the gods. Sometimes a passage ran around the sanctum so that the devotees could go round it. Images of many other gods could be put in this passage. The entire structure was enclosed in the courtyard, surrounded by high walls, which were pierced by lofty gates called gopurams. In course of time, the vimanas rose higher and higher. The number of courtyards were increased to 2 or 3, and the gopurams also became more and more elaborate. Thus, the temple became a miniature city or a place with living rooms for priests and many other being provided in it. The temples generally enjoyed revenue free grants of land for their expense. They also received grants and rich donation from the wealthy merchants. Some of the temples became so rich that they entered business, lent money and took part in business enterprises. They also spent money on improving agriculture, digging tanks, wells, etc., and providing irrigation channels. An early example of Dravida style of temple architecture is the 8th century temple of Kal- Kalsinath at Kanjipuram, one of the finest and most elaborate temples of the style is, however, provided by the Brihadeshwara temple at Tanjavur built by Rajaraja I. This is also called the Rajaraja temple because the Cholas were in the habit of installing images of kings and queens in the courtyards of the temple. The temple at Gangaikonda Cholapuram, through its dilapidated condition is another fine example of temple architecture under the Chola. A large number of temples were built at other places in the South India. However, it may be well to remember that the proceeds for some of these activities were obtained from the plunder of the population of the neighboring area by the Chola ruler. After the fall of Chola, temple building activity continued under Chalukya of Kalyani and Hoysala. The district of Dharwar and the Hoysala capital Halebeed had a large number of temples. The most magnificent of this is Holeshwara temple. It is Holeshwara temple. It is best examples of what is called the Chalukya style. Apart from the image of God and their attendants, both men and women. Yaksha and Yakshini. The temple contained finely sculptured panels which show a busy panorama of life, including dance, music, and scene of war and love. Thus, life was closely integrated with religion for the common man. The temples were not merely a place for worship but the hub of social and cultural life as well. The art of sculpture attained a high level standard in South India during the period. One example of this was the Jain statue of Gomateshwara at Shravana Another aspect was image making, which reached its um, zenith in the dance figure of the Shiva called Natraja. Okay. The Nataraja figure of this period, particularly those in bronze, are considered masterpieces. Many fine examples of this are to be found in museums in India and abroad. The ruler of the various dynasties also patronized arts and letters during the period. While Sanskrit was regarded as the language of high culture, and a number of kings as well as scholars and court poets wrote in it, a remarkable feature of the period was the growth of literature in the local language of India. A number of popular saints called Nayanmars and Alvas, who were devotees of Shiva and Vishnu, respectively, flourished in Tamil kingdoms between the 6th and 9th century. They composed their works in Tamil. The writing of Shivite saint, which were collected into 11 volumes under the name Tirumurai in the early part of 12th century, are considered sacred and are looked upon as the fifth Veda. The age of fifth Veda. Okay, the age of Kambam, who is placed in the second half of the 11th and the early part of 12th century, is regarded as a golden age in Tamil literature. Ramayan is considered a classic in Tamil literature. Kamban is believed to have lived at the court of Chola king. Many others too look their themes from Ramayana and Mahabharata, thus bringing their classic near to the people. Though younger than Tamil, Kannada also became a literary language during this period. The Rashtrakuta, the Chalukya, and the Hoysala rulers patronized Kannada as well as Telugu. The Rashtrakuta king Amoghavarsha wrote a book on poetics in Kannada. Many Jain scholars also contributed to the growth of Kannada. Pampa, Ponna, and Ranna are regarded as the three germs of Kannada poetry. Although they were under the influence of Jainism, they also wrote on themes taken from the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Nayana, who lived at the court of Chalukya king, began the Telugu version of Mahabharata. The work began by him was completed in the 3rd century by Tikana. Like the Tamil Ramayana, the Telugu Ramayana is a classic which inspired many subsequent writers. Many folk or popular themes are also to be found in this literature. Popular themes which were not derived from Sanskrit and which reflected popular sentiments and emotions are called Desi or rural in Telugu. We can see we can thus see that the period from the 8th to the 12th century was not only remarkable for the growth of religious kingdom and regional integration, but was also a period of cultural growth and development of trade, commerce, and agriculture in South India. Merchant and artisans increased their strength with the development of foreign trade under the Cholas. Thank you.